What's going on, everybody? Today we're putting on some new front disc brake rotors on my 2007 Yamaha FZ6. If you saw in my last front brake video, mine were worn out down to 4.18 millimeters, which was a bit of a yikes moment. So today I've ordered some new ones off eBay for a good used price. They measured a 4.95 millimeters. Got them for about 120 bucks, which saved me about $600 instead of buying them brand new. Only lost 0.05 of a millimeter. So today I'm going to show you how to install them. The job's pretty easy. It does involve taking off the front wheel and taking off your front brakes. You will have to get the front end of the bike in the air, so I'm going to use a little scissor jack on my engine support bar here, but you could use a little bit of wood under your exhaust, maybe hold it up there, or if you had a helpful friend, they could just push down on the back of the bike while it's on its center stand to lever up the front of the wheel. So there's some ideas for how you're going to hold up the front wheel. And I'll show you a special tool I made at home that you can make at home too to take off your front wheel easily, because it's hard to get a big hex like this in stores, and there's no point buying the tool when I can show you the trick that I did. So let's get into it. First thing we got to do is dismount the calipers off the fork leg because they get in the way when the wheel's coming off. You have two 12 millimeters that hold on the caliper to the fork leg, one up here, one down behind the reflector here. Repeat the same on the other side. String your calipers up away from the front wheel. There's one clip on the top of the fender here that undoing will give you a little bit more room to move the brake lines around. This is my special tool I use to take the axle out of the front wheel. It's a 1/2 inch bolt that has a 19 millimeter head, which is equivalent to 3/4 of an inch. I've just put on two 1/2 inch nuts here bound together so they lock. With these two nuts being jammed together, I can rotate the bolt and not the nut. Instead of taking the rotor off and fighting with these hex head bolts when the wheel's on the ground and not stabilized on the bike, I'm going to loosen the hex heads that hold the rotor to the wheel now. They're very tough to take off. Even though the torque spec isn't very high, they are Loctited in there, so be very careful not to strip them and make sure your hex head is all the way into the bolt. Couple things to take note when you've got your wheel off. You always want your new parts to go on the same way that the old parts came off so that you don't put them on backwards. So one thing to take note of is the rivet flange style. This is the face of the rivet that faces out. Down here you can see that there's like a 2-layer fold thing on the rivet. That's the inboard side of the rotor. Also to keep in mind, these things will come out of your wheel. They're kind of the axle guides and they seal your bearing on the side of your wheel. So don't let these fall out and don't let them go missing when you're taking your wheel out or reinstalling them. With the new rotor cleaned up, it's time to install. In an ideal world, you would run a tap down the holes where the bolts go into to get rid of any Loctite. I don't have that on hand, so instead I ran some Scotch-Brite over the threads here to clean off any old Loctite. I'm going to grab that now and install these. I'm using some blue medium grade thread locker from Permatex. The manual didn't specify whether it wanted permanent or non-permanent Loctite, but just taking out the bolts, you can see they're using blue, which is medium strength. So that's what I'm going to use here. Okay, so now with the rotors torqued down, it's ready to put it back into the front fork of the bike. This is a little tricky because these little cups want to fall out whenever you don't put them in dead straight. So make sure they're pressed lightly in place so that they're optimized for installation. Next, have your axle handy, ready to thread in. Okay, I'm going to lower the bike a little, see if I can make this a little easier on myself. That was an easier way of doing it instead of lifting it up. Gonna lower it just a hair more. A little more. Oh. And we're in. Nice. With our axle in, we can tighten it up. The axle gets torqued to 52 foot-pounds, and the pinch bolt over here gets torqued to 17 foot-pounds. I'm just gonna run it in with my ratchet and then switch to my torque wrench. Now we'll switch it out, drop the torque setting to 17 foot-pounds, and we'll be good to go. With a wobble like this, you really gotta try and keep it straight on so you don't mess up the torque reading. Good. These two caliper bolts here and here that hold the caliper to the lower fork leg are torqued to 29 foot-pounds. That's a wrap on the front rotor replacement on this 2007 Yamaha FZ6. I think the new front rotors look pretty clean on the bike. Pretty happy with the results considering how cheap I got them for. Just goes to show that used parts sometimes pays off. I really didn't want to spend the equivalent of 800 Canadian dollars just to replace new rotors. With that in mind, guys, check your rotors. Had I not been filming videos for you, I probably wouldn't have checked my rotors and known they were below the minimum. So every season, it's probably a good idea to check over these wear items like your pads, your rotors, front and rear, to ensure that you're safe on the road. The last thing I want for any of you is to fly into a corner and not have good brakes, and you know what happens when you don't brake into a corner. All the torque specs and other specifications will be down in the description. As always, please smash the like and subscribe button down below. It really helps me out. And as always, have a good day.